friends, happy March. It is a great day. My art supply budget has reset for the month. There's a new Hosier album out. It's fantastic. And I am here to flip my Traveler's Notebook art journal for you once again for the month of February. So I went through a lot of changes this month with my art style and with my goals for my art journal. The format stayed mostly the same. I still have my vellum, I still have a photo, I still have some form of sketch. This was representative of the indigo dyeing that I did. You saw that last entry for January involved the indigo dyeing, and this was the finished result the next day when I undid all of the clamps and took everything out and rinsed them. So I tried to capture that star pattern here with some indanthrone blue watercolor. This next day I picked up a Canon selfie printer that I really enjoy, so I played around with doing giant photos and incorporating them with collage and with painting, and then leaving nothing on my vellum except for the writing and the tab, which I really like the reverse writing over the image. I think that's cool, and I'm probably going to play with that some more in the future. And I enjoyed using my homemade washi for these candles in the background here. We went to a birthday party that day. Fun, bright, colorful pages. So this next spread was like the total opposite of all of the effort that I put into the previous pages. You can really see just how I phoned this in. The sketches are not very detailed. I didn't put much work into the paintings. And both of these days, it was kind of like a little come to Jesus moment where I'm like, what is the point of doing this every day if I'm just gonna sketch stuff like this? That, yes, it's boring, but I don't think that's an excuse to not put the effort into it. So I sat down and had a good long think and decided that what I really want out of this practice, out of this journal, out of doing this every day, is to end up with a piece of art on every page that actually represents my skills, my style as of that moment, because style is always evolving, and that I can look back on and say, yes, I gave everything that I had that particular day. Yes, some days I'm tired. Some days I'm doing this right before I go to bed. But again, I don't think that's an excuse to not give 100% of the skills that I have in a given moment. So that was kind of a turning point for me. And from then on, things started to look a little bit better. Again, I'm playing around with the larger image. It's also my whole tip in, so I'm just writing on the back of that, and I stamped my date this time around. It was fun, but it wasn't something that I wanted to continue. I did play around with some watercolor effects in the background here, meant to represent street lights in the fog. It was a very foggy day. And the paper in this insert is Crane's 100% cotton business paper, which is literally like a resume or business correspondence paper. But it's cotton, and it does have a certain amount of sizing to it. So it does behave pretty well with watercolors, a lot better than my Tomoe River paper insert, and it allowed me to do a certain amount of actual watercolor techniques. Like I can fade to a certain extent, I can lift to a certain extent. So it's a nice middle ground between having actual watercolor paper, which is usually way too thick for an insert, and having that really thin journal size paper where I can fit a whole month in one insert. So that's what I've been doing here. As you can see, it still cauliflowers a lot and does some unpredictable things sometimes, but still I'm really enjoying this paper, and I do still have several pre-made inserts ready to go. Over here is where I started to move more towards the style that I wanted to do. This was at a coffee house. This was my tea setup. They really go all out with the loose leaf tea. And I was really happy with how that sketch turned out. I don't work in a lot of layers in my watercolors in my journal, just because it is something that I'm trying to do fast. But with this one, I went in and did the layers of wood grain. I'm really happy with how that turned out. For the most part though, I do try to put down the color values that I want right off the bat and not build up to that when I'm working in my journal. And then over here you can see I did do a little bit of blending in this cup and a little bit of glazing in the teapot as well and on the tray. So most of the time though, when I'm working in this, it's still wet. So you can kind of see how that bled over here when I was trying to blend out the tray as well and do some glazing there. But again, this was where I started to feel like, yes, this is getting where I want it to be. So then I I'm glad that I did this page. I'm not happy with how it turned out, but I'm glad that I did it. The sunset that day was very green and interesting, and I tried to use my brush pen to get the tree, which just not very successful in my book, but I am glad that I did this page so I could know that it does not spark joy. And then over here, I started to do what became my consistent style for the rest of this booklet. So you'll notice I am not doing lining over my pencil sketch. It is just that purple mechanical pencil lead. And those are my dogs napping. So I did really like the sketchy style. With that pencil lead, I can get a decent range of values, so I can make my lines pretty straightforward and pretty clear without losing the sketchy quality. And I found as I went on, I just really continued to enjoy that. I bought a new tray that day that is just the perfect size for working in my journal on the armchair in the evenings, so that's really nice. And then over here, I got a B6 size traveler's notebook. This is the Kelly Creates traveler's notebook from her line of lettering stuff. And I really like the way that it's made, but I did need to modify it. I took off these strings and I actually put elastics on it so that it's more of a proper traveler's notebook. And on both of these, I always end up with a lot of negative space because I leave room for my photos and my vellum to cover. So on both of these pages, I started to play with pattern and just messing around with polka dots or raindrops, whatever you want to consider them, basically, to kind of fill that space and give it a little more visual interest. So I'll get to this page in a minute because it's my favorite page. I sketched a crow. Again, I'm working with the pattern over here, just trying to fill that negative space and make it a little less bland and straightforward. And then the next day, out of nowhere, my daughter said to me, "Do you know about moonboats?" And I said, "Moonboats? That's a really cool idea." So I sketched my idea of what that might look like. We've been watching a lot of Avatar: The Last Airbender and Korra, so this has a very Water Tribe feel to me. But I am just so happy with how this came out. It also started to get me back into lettering because I wanted to include her quote. And I did this with a Tombow marker on the same cotton paper, separate piece. I didn't want to do it on the paper itself in case I messed it up. So I wrote it out on the cotton paper and then I sprayed it with some water to make the lettering run, which has become one of my favorite techniques with lettering, just to play around with. So that's my favorite page. And then my best friend sent me a mix CD for Valentine's Day. It was super sweet. And then I did some more lettering down here that was pencil outlines, which I really like doing, and then watercolor on the inside, which again I really like doing. I just didn't want to go in cold with the watercolor brush trying to do all this lettering and then committing to something and not liking it. So that's why I sketched it out first. And I do really like the purple outlines and the sketchiness around the watercolor. Over here, I rented some microphones for a recording weekend with my band. Again, still just kind of messing around. Obviously, I'm filling the negative space with lettering here, but I'm still messing around with different patterns and lines and things to fill that space. This was the recording weekend that we went on. We stayed in a fishing shack outside of Branson and collected a lot of cool rocks and sticks at the lakeside. And then on the way back home the next day, I saw all these newspaper boxes lined up in a parking lot. And I actually pulled over and snapped a picture so I could sketch them later because I liked how colorful they were and how sort of bleak it was. They were just kind of standing by themselves in this parking lot in winter, and there wasn't much going on. And I thought that was very visually interesting. Another crow friend here, another different kind of pattern down here. And then over here, I took a photo of this on my walk. This was the ditch around the corner from my house. It had a little ice shelf. It had a lot of stripes of ice in it. And I thought it looked pretty cool. So I painted that. Really happy with how this turned out, especially the luminosity of that yellow-green, green-gold paint. Really, really successful, and I'm happy with that one. Took my dogs to the vet. Only Isabel needed to go to the vet, but Moxie wouldn't let us leave without her, so she came along and she got lots of treats. She loves when we go to the vet because she never has any problems. Has to get swabbed. And then I bought a moth patch the next day that I really enjoyed the colors of and the patterns. So I sketched that and played some more with just expanding that line work out. Kind of gives it some depth that I really enjoy. I made myself one of those washi tubes. I saw the Mako washi tubes that are so cute and so expensive because you can only get them from Japan. So I made myself one out of a glitter container that I cut a slot in with a hot knife. It was very involved work. And then I wrapped some of my washi samples around little pieces of drinking straws and stuck those in there, and it works pretty well actually. And it holds 5 instead of the 4 that the Mako dispenser does. Bought my kids some Pokemon cards for the first time. We spent 2 full hours playing our first game of Pokemon, and we didn't even finish. We just ended when it was dinner time, and I had just evolved up to Charizard and done 400 hit points of damage to her. Her and her poor little Pikachu. Got some new sewing scissors. Over here we went to the aquarium, and inside the aquarium's front door they have this extremely dramatic sculpture of a squid attacking a sperm whale. So obviously I had to paint that. That was just super impressive. More crows, crows on trash. Over here is the concept for the benefit show for my organization that's going to happen this year. So I've been practicing to do that all by hand because I don't think I can get the effect that I want without doing it by hand. I tried to do it on an iPad. It just wasn't really working out for me because I don't have enough experience working with Procreate and with an Apple Pencil. So it's going to be black and white. I'm going to do it in line art and then scan it and invert that. But I did want to do a color version just to get that lovely Luna Moth green color. And then last day of the month. So this is the front door window of a house that we looked at. We're casually looking at new houses right now, which is very exciting. And then, like I said, the new Hosier album is out now, and I watched a video yesterday talking about how his mom actually did the cover art, and I was trying to do an homage to that. It was all photographed underwater, and then she painted from those photographs. So that was my effort to kind of duplicate that look, and again, really happy with how it turned out. So much artistic progress made in the last month, even though it was so short. How short was February? It's gone already. For the month of March, I am going to attempt to use Arch's 90-pound watercolor paper. This is a whole month's worth. This will get me all the way to the 31st, doing it every single day. So this is going to be an experiment because it is chonky. It also, I haven't weighted this down, I just made it. So it's going to pop open probably for most of the month. And it's going to take up a lot of space in my journal, so I cleaned out some extra stuff in there that I didn't necessarily need. But I do think that it's going to really take the art side of things to the next level, having that in there. So fortunately, even with that in there, there's still no overhang. If it were 140-pound watercolor paper, I could not do this at all. The 90-pound just makes all the difference. It's so much thinner. And I think I'm going to enjoy working on that. If it works out well, I will make some more inserts to see me through the rest of the year. But in the meantime, I do still have several months worth of the Crane's cotton paper. So that is that for the month of March. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you again very soon.